Speaking Sports Hotline. NASCAR reporter for Fox Sports, Bob Pockrass. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Frank. How are you?
I am doing terrific. Hey, let me ask you a question right as we start here, Bob. As a reporter who lives and dies by NASCAR and the events that NASCAR put on, not having racing for the past 8 weeks, what kind of impact has that had on you?
I've kept busy. There's been just so much news about when NASCAR might get restarted, the things that NASCAR need to do in order to get restarted, the impact on the teams throughout the suspension of the season, and then also the simulated racing events that they've had every week. It's been busy. I've certainly missed hearing actual sound of a car engine, but it's been busy from a reporter standpoint.
Now, let me ask you this. Next Sunday, a week from this Sunday, NASCAR is going to be the first sport in America to actually start back up, start their season back up. How big is this for NASCAR?
Well, getting restarted is big for NASCAR because the financial foundation of the sport relies on racing. The TV money doesn't go to the racetracks unless they race. The TV money that goes into the purse that goes to the race teams isn't paid out unless they race. Sponsors certainly aren't going to pay if their logos aren't on TV. So in order to have these teams survive, these teams aren't owned, many of them are not owned by, big companies or billionaires. They need the cash flow. And so that's why it's important. And because of that financial incentive, I think they're willing to take the quote unquote risk of being one of the first sports back to having their events. I hope that it's not because, hey, there's a great opportunity because it's going to be one of the first sports back and everybody's going to be home and everybody's going to want to watch live sports. I hope that is not as much of an incentive as is just the fact that, hey, in order for the teams to survive, they have to race. I think the first part I can understand wanting to take the risk. The second part, granted, yes, it's an opportunity, but let's not have that be the incentive to potentially put people's health at risk.
Now, Bob, in the last couple of days, I'm talking to Bob Pockrass, NASCAR reporter for Fox Sports. News came out, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, that they're taking 3 races and they're going to put 2 more in Darlington and then one more in, I believe, Charlotte in North Carolina. Any word yet of where those 2 races are coming from and which cities are going to lose those races?
Yeah, so there'll be 3 races that were scheduled that will lose them because you're going to have to give now 2 additional races that are at Darlington next starting May 17, and then an additional one at Charlotte the following week. So NASCAR hasn't announced those. Teams have indicated that they've been hearing that it'll be 1 intermediate track, 1 short track, and 1 road course. A lot of people obviously think Sonoma is likely to be canceled because of the amount of travel it would take to get out there and the current restrictions in California. NASCAR has promised to tell the teams by next week which tracks will lose races because a lot of them, the sponsorships are either regional or they're specific to a time of year. So people want to know which races they're not going to be, which races if they sold sponsorship for, they potentially could transfer to these races coming up.
Now, with this Darlington race coming up a week from Sunday, from what I understand, there's not going to be no qualifying for this race. So explain to the fans how the starting lineup is going to be determined without qualifying.
Yeah, there's going to be no practice and no qualifying. NASCAR is we're still waiting to hear a final decision from NASCAR on that. They could just say we're going to line you up by what's called the owner points, which is pretty much the point standings, the driver standings. But they also are looking at, do they take the finishing order from the last race and maybe invert the top 10? Or do they take owner points and say, okay, let's take the top 15 in owner points and do a random draw for the top 15 spots, and then the next 15 do a random draw for the next 15 spots. They're trying to look at ways to make sure that they don't just have the same starting order for every single one of these races that doesn't have qualifying.
Okay, well, we're Bob Pockrass, NASCAR reporter for Fox Sports. Let me ask you, is there any rule changes that are due to COVID-19 that the fans who are watching the race should be made aware of?
There will be they're gonna have a competition caution early in the Darlington race, and because they've had no practice in qualifying, and that will probably be somewhat of a lengthy caution so that teams have time to make adjustments. So I think there'll be some changes from that end. Everything else should be fairly the same as far as from green flag to checkered flag.
Okay, now, from a driver's perspective, and it might be difficult for you to answer from a driver's perspective, but also from a reporter's perspective, how weird is it going to be racing in front of no fans?
It's going to be weird, because the drivers hear the fans cheer, during driver introductions. Sometimes they can hear them, when they're under caution. I think what's going to be more weird for them is that a driver, typically a driver, is hanging out with his crew a little bit during a race weekend in the hauler. They have meetings. Now a driver's they're going to go to they've been told they can have their motorhome at the racetrack. Then their motorhome driver has to leave. They'll drive their car to the motorhome. They'll get dressed in their motorhome, and they'll go to the car and get in the car. They're not going to be with their crew in the sense of mingling with them. And each team's crew, let's say Hendrick Motorsports has the 24 team. They all have to stick together. They can't go to where the 80 team, the 88 is, where the crew of the 88 is, because they want everybody to be in kind of their separate own little pods, for lack of a better term, and not have people cross a lot of paths, because that way, if somebody does test positive, they feel like that they can hopefully control spread. So I think that's going to be the biggest difference for the drivers, beyond just not having fans, just not having that interaction, face-to-face interaction with their team that they usually do on a race weekend.
Does that offer more danger to the driver when they finally get in that in the automobile and start driving?
Well, certainly that, I assume maybe they'll have a few more pace laps, but yeah, you don't know what the car's going to do at speed. So it'd be much like going out there on your first lap of practice and hoping that everything is tight and everything. But if something came loose, you could, you're not in a racing condition where you could be collected by 20 other cars. So yes, there is a little bit more, I would say, of a danger aspect, a little bit more of an uncertainty when you start a race like this than you would in normally.
Now, before I let you go, Bob, I have one more question for you. Is there any word that you heard of from NASCAR if or when they may be, fans may be allowed back in the stands?
They haven't said. I think it's going to be all up to where they're racing and what the local governments will allow. Certainly, some of these places have a lot of fans, and you could potentially, get 10, 20,000 people in there and have social distancing measures in effect. But NASCAR hasn't said when they would hope to do that.
All right. Bob, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking Sports. It's been a real pleasure.
Hey, thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.
All right. Good luck to you.